Hello, and welcome to the Crypto Beat, where we discuss what's happening right now in the crypto space. My name is Tim Copeland. I'm the editor-in-chief of The Block. Joining me today, we have Nick Johnson, founder and lead developer of the Ethereum name service. Welcome to the show. How are we doing?
Thank you. Doing great.
Awesome. Now, I first met Nick at DevCon in 2019, which was held at the Prague Congress Center. Also at the Prague Congress Center this year is Emergence, the Block's first crypto conference. It's featuring a stacked lineup with some of crypto's biggest names. We're seeing ticket sales coming in heavily. And for all the listeners out there, if you want to come, make sure to use the discount code, TheCryptoBeat, all one word, lowercase, for 20% off. Okay, now today, we're here to chat about the future of ENS. Nick, first up, set the scene. What is ENS?
ENS is the Ethereum name service, and many people think that the name Ethereum there implies we're just for naming things on Ethereum, but we are the naming service on Ethereum for all crypto resources. So rather than entering a long and difficult to or impossible to remember Bitcoin address or Ethereum address or name your crypto, you can enter an ENS name like nick.eth, and that applies even more widely than just crypto addresses to things such as decentralized content like websites and so forth.
Cool. Now, you recently announced that you're launching a rollup called Namechain. Why does ENS need its own rollup?
Well, in short, ENS has some fairly unique requirements from a rollup. We definitely want to improve the user experience and the cost effectiveness of creating and updating ENS names. And that's, there's a limit to what we can do on mainnet with that. So the need to move to a rollup was pretty much inevitable. But we have slightly different requirements to your typical, decentralized app that's finance orientated, for instance. Our users often come along, do a little update, and then go off to whatever it is that they were doing at the time, rather than the typical sort of bridge on, do a whole bunch of stuff, potentially bridge off at the end type workflow. In addition to that, our workflow is very read heavy. So for every write to ENS, there are thousands of reads. And so it's really important that the chain support effectively proving its state, doing that efficiently, and having a very low latency between updating the state and being able to prove it on chain. And so those are all things that are somewhat contrary to the typical needs of an L2. So we thought it was important to build something that truly fits our needs.
Okay. And out of curiosity, is it named after Namecoin, which was a peer-to-peer naming system based on Bitcoin in 2011?
No, it seemed like an obvious name in some ways for a name-based chain, and we were surprised and delighted to find that the only people selling name chains were selling physical chains with names on them, so there wasn't really much opportunity for confusion there.
Okay, and have you started buying some of those to create a good swag store?
I did think about bringing the little bits to a conference so people could make their own.
Nice. Cool. Now, what will the rollup be used for? Will it be only for like ENS purposes, or will it be general purpose? Can I start, creating dexes on it, that sort of thing?
Mm-hmm. It will be a general purpose EVM compatible rollup. So in principle, if you wanted to deploy a DEX there, you could. That won't be our main focus. Its primary aim will be to host most of the ENS infrastructure. The way we're doing it, the root of ENS will still be hosted on Ethereum, but all of the .eth domains and subdomains will be hosted on Namechain by default, as well as giving people the flexibility to move non.eth names to Namechain as well. Beyond that, we expect to see ENS aligned and ENS adjacent services migrate to Namechain, such as name trading and so on and so forth, and all of the sort of associated infrastructure required by all of this. And anyone's free to deploy on it, but of course, I would say that if you're wanting to set up a generic DEX, there's probably chains that are more orientated around that.
Okay, so you said that .eth is going to still be on mainnet. But all the sort of subdomains are on layer 2, right?
So the root, which is sort of the parent domain of .eth and .com and everything, the empty name will be on Ethereum. And then when you look up .eth, it will direct you to Namechain, or rather it will direct your software to Namechain. And so all the .eth names will be on Namechain by default.
Okay, so Namechain is going to become the de facto source of truth for all ENS names going ahead.
For all .eth ENS names, but ENS is much more than just .eth.
I don't know if I actually knew that. So as in, are we talking like it has like other blockchains?
No, but we do support importing DNS names. So, for example, the .box TLD has integrated very closely with ENS. So every .box domain is automatically an ENS name as well. And even if you use a name that isn't directly integrated, we support integration via DNSSEC, which allows us to prove the owner and the existence of DNS records on a name. So you can import any arbitrary DNS name into ENS and use it the same way you would a .eth name.
Okay, cool. So in terms of like, let's say like my ENS name, for instance, like Tim Copeland.eth, what happens to that? Is it going to get automatically migrated to Namechain? Surely like it's an NFT that exists in my wallet. Like what does that NFT stay the same? Does that disappear? Do I get a second one? How's it all going to work?
So what we're doing is, we're effectively deploying this as a new version of ENS. The new version will be backwards compatible in the sense that if you try and resolve a name that hasn't been migrated yet, it will still resolve the same as as any other name. Once Namechain is deployed, people will have the opportunity to migrate their names to V2. And so that either means moving the name to Namechain, in which case you burn the original NFT and you get issued a new one on Namechain, or even to migrate it but keep it on V1 on L1 if you want your names to stay around on Ethereum. That process will be up to users, but we are putting together a pre-migration setup so that users who want to will be able to authorize us to migrate their name for them before the launch of Namechain.
Okay. And so if someone tried to get like Tim Copeland.eth on Namechain, is it just not available because it exists on mainnet?
That's right. So what we will do as part of the migration is create records on Namechain for every .eth name, migrated or not. And even if you haven't migrated, that name then is sort of reserved on V2 until you migrate the name. If you never migrate the name, which is an option, the name continues to be yours. You can renew it and so on, and nobody else can register it. ENS's sort of guiding light here is that it's crucial that there's never the same name resolves to different things for different people. So it's absolutely, a sort of a guiding star that we prevent that sort of thing.
Yeah, that makes sense. Do you think there'll be more like DEXs that will sort of spring up for the purpose of trading ENS names? Like, do you think like the trading of them can become a lot more frequent if it's cheaper to do so?
I think it's certainly a possibility, yeah. And there are existing ENS-specific NFT exchanges, and I imagine they will look to move to Namechain since it's much more effective than remaining on mainnet. Whether we'll see new ones crop up, I'm not sure.
And what's the incentive to bridge over? Like if, let's say if I didn't bridge over, for instance, it would still be valid. But there would be a cost, I presume, to porting over, particularly on the mainnet side of things. So what's the sort of incentive for people?
So two reasons, really. One is that if you migrate and you choose to move the name to Namechain, then all future changes, updates, renewals, etc., are much more affordable because they're only an L2 transaction. So you do this single L1 transaction and then you don't have to worry about it again. If you want to migrate but stay on L1, so keep the name on Ethereum, then there are still advantages because it lets you take advantage of the new infrastructure we're developing. Aside from being a migration to L2, Namechain, the ENS v2 also incorporates a lot of changes in the ENS infrastructure, which enables things like more flexible control over how you own the name, which makes it much easier to do things like sell subdomains, rent them out, etc., which are technically possible under the current infrastructure, but will be much more straightforward under the new system.
Okay. Is there any like security concerns in terms of, because right now, like most L2s are, pretty centralized. Does this sort of go from a very sort of secure mainnet to a more centralized, at least in the interim?
Yeah, and we recognize that for some people, any form of L2 is not an acceptable trade-off, which is why when migrating, everyone has the option to migrate to V2 but keep the name on Ethereum. We're also committed to being fully decentralized. So when either Namechain will be fully decentralized when it launches with a decentralized sequencing, or it will be with a very short roadmap to being at a completely decentralized endpoint shortly after launch.
Cool. And what will you be using like zero knowledge proofs for?
So I mentioned earlier that Namechain and ENS have some quite unique requirements, and one of those is that we need a very short time to finality. So if you look at an optimistic rollup like Optimism, typical finalization period is on the order of 2 weeks. The issue with ENS is that with our read operations, we're often looking to determine what a name resolves to, which requires reading the state. If your state is non-finalized and could be reverted at any time, then reading that state is risky. So you need to read only the finalized state. And if that takes 2 weeks, then, well, it's simply unacceptable that a user makes a change to what their name resolves to, and it takes 2 weeks for it to be reflected. And so we have a very strong focus on minimizing that time, and that unfortunately rules out optimistic rollups, and so requires us to focus on ZK rollups instead.
Okay. And how does all of this fit into the sort of V2 plan that I saw being discussed?
So basically what we are doing is we're re-architecting ENS to ENS V2 at the same time as we are launching Namechain. And so Namechain is an integral part of V2, but it's not the whole story. So what we're doing at the same time is rebuilding the way ENS is structured from a single flat registry that is used for all names at all levels into a hierarchical system where each name can designate a registry for its subnames and so forth. And this adds a lot of flexibility to the system that wasn't there before.
Okay, cool. And you say I saw in the article we read about Namechain, you're looking like end of 2025 for this. How long has this sort of been in the works?
I would say we've probably been sort of ideating on it for a year or more, but really seriously planning and considering it for probably about 6 months.
Okay. And what was the sort of one thing that made you realize like this is something that sort of needs to be done for the protocol to evolve?
Well, our shorter term solutions to gas prices and to scaling were CCIP read, which is a solution that lets you read data from other chains and in fact also from entirely off-chain sources. And that helps a lot with subdomains and a lot of other things. The thing it can't help with is registration renewals of .eth names. And it became apparent over time that while CCIP read made a big difference to scalability and to usability and cost effectiveness for a subset of our users, there were a lot of users who were, for whom that was never going to be enough of a solution because they needed .eth registrations, renewals, record updates, etc., to be much more affordable and, preferably even without the overhead of a single L1 transaction to sort of delegate a name to Namechain or to, some off-chain system. And so, at that point, it became clear that really the only way forward was to launch a chain of our own.
Okay, and how will the ENS token be used on the chain? Like, will it be used for gas fees?
So our plan is to, like a true L2, it will be ETH native. So Ether will be the native token and most likely be used to pay for the gas fees. ENS tokens will remain a governance token for the DAO and also for whatever mechanisms Namechain has for, operations such as upgrades and so forth.
Okay. Can you right now can you buy ENS names using the ENS token?
Not directly. No, you'd need to go via a DEX.
Okay. And have you what's it been like with similar versions of ENS cropping up on other blockchains? Because obviously I know you can put your Solana address on your, attach it to your Ethereum name, but what's it been like looking at the emergence of alternative protocols and alternative blockchains? Is that a market you really strongly want to go after, or are you willing, happy to let the sort of other competitors take the space on other chains?
So, I said at the beginning that ENS is on Ethereum, not just for Ethereum. And that's kind of the approach we take. These competing systems, I would emphasize, I guess, that you can use ENS to name your Solana account just as you can your Ethereum account. And I think a move to Namechain and also embracing technologies such as meta-transactions and so forth will make that an easier and more practical alternative for people who don't have a foot in the Ethereum ecosystem. And so, we'll make other, lesser known systems a less attractive proposition.
Are you finding projects on other blockchains adopting ENS or the sort of native naming system for those chains?
It's a combination of both. In some cases, it's pretty clear that it was, inspired by ENS. In some cases, quite heavily. In some cases, it's just outright a fork of ENS. And this is a thing that happens when you publish your source and license it permissively. That's by design. And in other cases, of course, like Solana, for instance, they have their own entirely native naming system. It's quite a diverse ecosystem out there.
Okay. And what's it been like working with Venmo and PayPal on their ENS integrations?
It's been just outstanding to see it launch and get adopted. It's it's sometimes do a bit of a double take on just that and GoDaddy and integration into Google Search and so on. It's been a pretty incredible year, and it's astonishing to look at the variety of large companies that have adopted ENS.
Were you surprised by Google's sort of enthusiasm to integrate them?
I guess not. Well, it depends how you look at it. I worked at Google for a long time, and so I have, some inkling of the internal sort of culture there. And so it didn't surprise me to find that there were people at Google enthusiastic about it. It surprised me a little that they, won out in a way that they were able to promote that as something that should be featured, and makes it to the front end.
Did they work with you on that, or did they just do it all on their own bat?
It was largely independent, yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, also as an alumni of the Ethereum Foundation, I'm curious to know your thoughts on how valuable you think it is as an organization within Ethereum these days. It seems to have come under sort of a lot of criticism lately, partly due to the selling of ETH. I'm curious to know, where you stand on sort of its function within the ecosystem.
I think the EF would be the first to say that they don't want to be crucial to the ecosystem forever. They've long had plans to reduce the dependency of the ecosystem on them to a healthy level. In fact, ENS started off as an Ethereum Foundation project and was spun out into its own organization because we and they believed that was better than just sort of growing the EF indefinitely. I think they do a lot of good for the ecosystem. I think that they need to pay salaries, and so they need to sell tokens to do that, and that's a totally reasonable thing for them to do.
Yeah, I think some people noticed the optics of selling at the same time that Justin Drake was talking about a 5-year roadmap for the Beam chain. That's what it's called. Were you excited to see the Beam chain proposal come out?
I have to confess I have been heads down on Namechain, and so I haven't given it serious consideration.
Okay. Basically, it's looking at getting Ethereum down to sort of 4-second blocks by the end of the decade.
Yeah, that would be very welcome, and it's the sort of thing that matters a lot to us, as as I alluded to with the finality period and so forth.
What's been the biggest challenge working, sort of building on the Ethereum blockchain?
I guess like you have to take a great deal of care to get things right because of the immutability, and that's just the nature of developing on blockchains in general. We have upgrade mechanisms and so on, but we're not a big fan of the proxy mechanisms and so on we see elsewhere, because I think core infrastructure should be very tightly controlled, and very carefully administered and permission minimized. And so that puts more pressure on us to get things right the first time, and then to sort of look very seriously at what things need to be upgradable and how we can actually do that without increasing the sort of threat surface and affecting our decentralization. So the biggest challenge really is just trying to hold true to those principles of trust minimization while still giving ourselves an out if we make any major mistakes.
How decentralized is ENS? Because I mean, sort of to some degree, you guys have to hold like the root domain, and it sort of all stems from that. And then I assume if the contracts are upgradable, that's within a few hands as well.
So that's the thing. We, for the most part, we avoid upgradability except where absolutely necessary. So the DAO does own the root domain, but it owns it indirectly via a contract, and the contract has the ability to lock out control of individual TLDs. And so the .eth TLD is locked out. So although the DAO controls the root, they can't directly affect the .eth TLD. That's permanently assigned to a contract, and that contract is not upgradable. That contract does have a provision for controllers, which is how registrations and renewals are handled, and so we can appoint new controllers and remove old ones. But while a controller can change the registration and renewal logic, it can't affect existing names. So there's no way for the DAO, no matter how it voted or who signed it or what multi-sigs were compromised, to say cancel a registration of an existing name or transfer it contrary to its owner's wishes.
Okay. Yeah, how has the adoption of ENS evolved over time? Like, does it sort of like fluctuate, like when there's, peak cycles, sort of peak prices, or has it just been sort of steadily growing over time? Like, how has it changed over the years?
I'd say it's a composition of the two. We've definitely grown over time independent of bull and bear cycles, but we definitely also see an enormous uptick in interest in the bull market. And that's evident by a lot of the sort of clubs and the speculative registrations we saw during the last bull. And then those things tend to reduce, in a bear market, but then we see organic growth and integrations and large companies adopting, and just an ongoing, steady tick of increasing registrations in general.
Okay. And I'd be curious to know if like that many people sort of within the sort of more tight-knit ETH community have been talking about the sort of price action for ETH as sort of being, I think a lot of traders have argued it's been struggling for a while. It's sort of become a little bit of a meme when sort of Bitcoin Solana's been popping off. Does that like distract you at all, or do you sort of ignore the the noise and the price action?
For my own part, I mostly ignore it. I joined Ethereum when it was about $20. And one thing I learned relatively quickly is that I have very little to no ability to predict what it's going to do. And I think most people that claim they can, at least in the short run, are probably fooling themselves. And so I bought some ETH back then and basically just went, well, the best thing I can do is ignore it as much as possible. And so I try and focus on what we're building instead.
Okay. And do you think any of the Ethereum ETFs are ever going to start adopting ENS start sort of publicly labeling their wallets, that sort of thing?
We have seen a little bit of that. I'm terrible with names, which is ironic. So I can't name the specific ones off the top of my head, but we have seen some of them labeling their wallets, publicly using ENS, and I think that and better exchange adoption are great ways to demonstrate further value of ENS.
Yeah. Okay. I would guess it's VanEck, but I don't know for sure. Yeah, a quick Google search didn't yield anything. Okay, cool. Well, that's all my questions. You had very concise answers. Clearly know your stuff. Awesome. All right, that's it. That's all we have for today. I want to thank Nick for joining. And make sure to follow us on Twitter, Twitch, and Spotify, and subscribe on YouTube. And remember, we have a 20% discount code for Emergence using the code TheCryptoBeat. And make sure to read the blog, stay informed on everything crypto. See you next time.